So, the other day, I finished my first time reading Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and I thought it would be interesting to share some of my thoughts. When I compare it to 1984, I think it's a much more accurate, a more prescient look into what at the time was the future and what is now in regards to the hedonistic over sexualization of society and the uh, rampant proliferation of SSRIs, which is rendered as a metaphor in the book through Soma. Now, one of the things that I think Aldous Huxley got right, obviously, is the image of the society itself. He often talked about how he was afraid that culture wouldn't be completely controlled, but that it would become irrelevant. And I think that is accurately the case when we talk about, say, the bread and circuses, the Netflix, the Mr. Beast, the rampant social media. We've really created a reductive environment for culture in today's world. And technological progress was another thing that he feared, which has absolutely played a role. I mean, um, the manifestation of Soma in the form of SSRIs is patently an example of how technology has facilitated creating the world that he was trying to warn against. But one thing that I think he was wrong about was he feared a loss of individuality. He feared collectivism. And I think when you look at how some of the things that have come to be in the modern day and mirror some of the phenomenon he tries to warn against in his book, you can kind of see that it wasn't the result of a collectivist ideology. The hypersexualization of the modern world, it didn't come about because of collectivism. Quite the opposite. I mean, it was sold to us as being something that's liberating, something that is going to extricate us from the restraints of oppression and patriarchy. None of the ways in which society has been dumbed down and come to worship sex, sexuality, has been a result of collectivism. It's been sold to us as something that we can use to express ourselves as individuals. When in actuality, when you give people unlimited freedom in this regard, they become less individualistic because, in theory, you give people unlimited choices and there's unlimited possibilities, but people tend to default to what is easiest, what is most comfortable, and what provides the most short-term gratification. And that is sex and drugs and lowbrow media that doesn't require being engaged with critically. And to that end, it wasn't collectivism and it wasn't authoritarianism that created this over-sexualized world that has an eerie resemblance to Brave New World. I mean, really, it was the idea that there is something freeing about unlimited hypergamy and this idea that we don't have a responsibility to society, we don't have a responsibility to our community to pursue more meaningful, more austere relationships with each other, that the only thing that matters is what brings us self-actualization, or whatever our perception of self-actualization is. And more often than not, the thing that we believe will bring us fulfillment, the thing that we believe will cause us to feel unburdened by the expectations of society, well, it's the same thing. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants to be a person that has no responsibility whatsoever and can do whatever they want. Me, 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 me. What can society do for me? And so to that end, I think he was wrong. Now, you can argue that there was a technocratic element that induced this. If you look back at the early 20s campaign by Edward Bernays, when he sold cigarettes to women. Now, at the time, there was a social taboo against smoking cigarettes. It was unladylike, unfeminine. And Edward Bernays had a brilliant marketing campaign that told them it was freeing, it was liberating. You know, it was going to help them reveal their inner beauty, their sultry side. And I mean, how can you argue against that? That's the early 20s. Patriotism is high. It's the American way. Acquire freedom by inhaling cancerous carcinogens. It's good for you, trust me. And I think that is one of the false assumptions of liberalism is the idea that it is possible to be free, because the only way people have this perception that the only way that you can be inhibited, that you can have your life regulated, is through a state. But the truth is, if no one is holding you accountable, if no one is setting external motivations, external responsibilities, and expectations for your behavior, you are still beholden to yourself. You are always enslaved in a way to your own limitations, your own capabilities. You are always a slave to the ways in which you don't foresee future outcomes of your actions, the ways in which you are lacking physically, mentally, or emotionally. People are always going to be inhibited by individual factors that prevent them from being a perfect person. There is no perfect person. And it's not the government that prevents you from being like that. Even if you happen to live in a perfectly liberalized world with absolute individual autonomy, you are always going to be burdened by the consequences of your own decision making and your ability to make good decisions. And that is one of the flaws in Western liberalism, which is often preoccupied with concerns of inequality, that it fails to consider the fact that when you give people equal opportunity, it is inevitable, an absolute guaranteed byproduct, that there will be unequal outcomes. That is a feature, that is not a bug. That is a byproduct of the fact that some people are going to make better decisions. Sometimes it's going to be because they're better people. They're smarter, better looking, more charismatic, more prone to athletic performance. And that is a cold fact. That is a genetic reality. And liberal individualism doesn't really have an answer to that. It is an underlying contradiction that it simultaneously espouses this ideal of unlimited individual freedom, but then also sees this as a way of producing equality, when in practice it tends to produce the opposite outcome. Its own underlying epistemology tends to be what produces the inequality. And to that end, I think Aldous Huxley was incorrect as to what would bring this about. We've given people unlimited freedom, and we've created one of the most hedonistic, self-serving realities that we possibly could have had. And the SSRIs are imbibed in large quantities to cope with the fact that some people weren't born with the golden ticket. They weren't born with the 130 plus IQ. They weren't born with the perfect six-pack ab genetics. They weren't born with the ability to be a great negotiator or a face of a model. And liberal individualism can't protect you from your own character defects